right? I never paid attention to where these things came from until about 2 weeks ago when I looked on the bag and it said California. And I'm kind of going, this is a fresh carrot. I was going to say green carrot. Fresh carrot, but it comes from California. I mean, do we think in 40 years' time we'll be having this conversation about importing carrots from California? I don't know about you, but when I grew up, we grew these things in the garden or in an allotment or where I was on the farm. And I just want to put that out there as an example of this is a bit nuts where we're importing these things to eat in Canada, because these things grow up here as well, don't they?
We're looking at ways to make our development greener. And I should just tell you a little bit about University for those who don't know. It is both intended to be a model sustainable community built on land owned by Simon Fraser University. It is also meant to make money. The net proceeds from our development go back to the university as an endowment for teaching and research. And we can never lose sight of the fact that however innovative and creative we want to be around sustainability and livability, if it isn't economic, it isn't sustainable. The project has to work. In Canada, the average life of a building at demolition is 17.4 years. That's it. And if we accept the estimate, 30% of all the total carbon generated by a building over its life is accounted for in the carbon that's embedded in the building materials and in the creation of that building itself. In many ways, the greenest building is the one you never tear down. And we're designing and building buildings that are fully meant to be torn down. In a region where diesel-powered buses are being used to take people up and down a steep incline in Burnaby, it occurs to us there's another way to do that. High-speed, tri-cable transit, gondola service is viable, it's feasible, it's economic, and we're pushing very hard, working with the province and the federal government and Translink in particular, to devise a solution that would replace the 145 shuttle bus from Production Way SkyTrain station. In a nutshell, 1,900 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reduced just in the first year. I think more significantly, 50,000 hours of diesel bus service taken off the hill in the first year. That service that can then be redeployed to those areas Translink has identified as a priority, particularly south of the Fraser River.
Cities have an inherent logic of themselves that may be more or less private or public at the given time. But if we can find a shared story of cities, given that 75% of us will be living in cities by 2050, the story of the planet is actually going to be the story of our cities. And therefore the story of how we want to find the right basis for living on the planet as 9 billion people is actually us in this room that are in some ways almost solely responsible for how that plays itself out. How you set your strategies in your cities, in your discussion with cities or around your board tables and development companies begins to start to set in concrete, set in motion, essentially the story of what the next 40 years are ultimately going to end up with. The more interesting thing is what do we do with the probably 70% of the building stock that exists now that will be the stock for then. Now, retrofitting existing stock, it's pretty hard to achieve more than a 30% reduction in energy or emissions. You can do radical stuff, but that's about it. In Vancouver alone, probably 200,000 homes need to be retrofitted in the next 40 years. You break that down to 50,000 homes a year, 200 business days a year. How many homes is that every day? That is nothing short of a construction revolution. Waste, of course, is the other big thing around emissions, but also economy and many other aspects. Zero waste is the target, 40 years to get there. Hey, Vancouver is already, the lower mainland, here is already around 60% diversion rate. That's a 10% difference per decade. We have an entire decade, basically 1% a year to start falling out of the landfill. I think we can do that. If you take a look at like 75% of the Fortune 500 right now are fully committed and reporting on full sustainability dashboards. That is starting to change the entire story of what the product line, which is really where the next chapter is organics and product stewardship. And it is simply coming, and it may simply happen automatically around us. The point is that our sustainability discussions in cities for 2050 need to become far more disciplined in this next chapter and to be held accountable to real performance targets. Asking ourselves to punch above our weight. That kind of dynamic is actually what's going to shape the story of 2050 rather than us simply becoming flotsam and jetsam in the story of time.
The point I want to make today in my few minutes is that we need to approach problems completely differently than we have in order to And so far, we've kind of said, okay, we got a problem, we need a solution. We got flooding, we need to build a dike. We got whatever it is, we need to do one solution. I think we need to change the way that we approach that, which is one solution to solve 4 or 5 problems. And that's really what sustainability is all about. Again, on the energy piece, solving multiple problems. This is a 40-acre site in the city of Chicago, huge blighted area. It's been vacant for 30 years. It was about $30 million to clean it up. Who's got the money? Particularly when the value of a cleaned up site is $2 million. Kind of upside down property. It's blighting the whole neighborhood, so it's 40 acres. We went to our utility and said, let's create the largest urban solar system in the world. They installed 36,000 solar panels. The city gave them land and said, look, we just need to park this for 25, 30 years because we can't do anything with it, and it's bringing down the whole neighborhood. You guys take it, build a solar system, 10 megawatt solar installation, the largest municipal installation in the world of that kind, and we've improved that neighborhood. Now there's other economic development happening adjacent to this site. We didn't put in a cent, actually we're making rent off of it. One program solves 3 or 4 problems, and that's really, in my opinion, when we looked out to 2050, the challenges that we have, which are massive, Vancouver is in a position to lead, and we need this kind of approach, which is utilizing the limited resources effectively. ULI is a great organization to help to drive that into our development community here in Vancouver.